Hey, there's a few issues I want to cover in this video, so please bear with me. I would also ask that you listen to everything I'm saying before you rush to judgment, or before you write a comment. I leave the comment section open because I want to be tolerant and have different viewpoints. But in return, I ask that people do me the service of just listening to the whole video, because otherwise you might jump to a conclusion about what my position is, and it might not be my position. So all I ask is that you listen to everything. I'll try not to speak too long. This is a very, very important issue that I'm going to talk about, and I think that it is an issue that unfortunately isn't an easy one to talk about, but it is a very important subject. That is the subject of Islamism and the influence on young jihadis in the United Kingdom. I'm going to stick to the United Kingdom for this video, although it's prevalent, or maybe I shouldn't say prevalent, but it's a problem in other European countries as well. But for the purpose of this, I'm going to stick to the United Kingdom. The context of this is that Channel 4 has reported that a 17-year-old from Dewsbury, which is a town near Leeds, has become arguably Britain's youngest suicide bomber, at least Britain's youngest confirmed suicide bomber. Tala Asmal, I think the guy's called. He's only 17 years old, and it's been confirmed that he was killed in Iraq, presumably in the last few days. How they found out it was him, I don't know, whether it was DNA tests or what that was. His family have spoken out or made a statement and said that he was always kind and caring, and he never showed extremist tendencies in the past. He'd went out there with another young man from Dewsbury, also 17. No word on his situation, but a video emerged from Islamic State, Daesh, ISIL, whatever you want to call them, purporting to show this guy in the group before his suicide mission in Iraq. Now, Iraq at the moment obviously remains still a very violent place, so it could be any number of those suicide bombings that have been going on in recent weeks that was carried out by him. Sometimes there's also failed suicide bombings where it detonates prematurely, and so on. I really do believe this is a subject that needs to be discussed. It is not a pleasant subject, and I appreciate that it makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but I don't think that is reason enough not to debate the subject. What I want to focus on is that there is a tendency in a lot of these videos concerning young jihadis, and it usually goes something like this. Oh, they're not a Muslim. This has nothing to do with Islam, they're not a Muslim. That is the tendency of a lot of people on these videos, presumably Muslims, who recognize that what they're seeing is a reprehensible thing, and they want to distance themselves from it. Now, this is entirely understandable, but I think it's problematic, and in the next few minutes I'm going to try and argue why I believe that is the case. We need to differentiate between anti-Muslim prejudice and legitimate debate about the more unsavory aspects of Islam. Now, I know there is an argument that Islam is perfect, Muslims are not. I still prefer that argument to the argument that, oh, they can't be a Muslim. At least saying Islam is perfect, Muslims are not, at least that acknowledges that there are imperfect Muslims. Now, the problem I have with this insinuation, they can't have done that. They can't be true Muslims if they've done that. And it isn't just in cases of terrorism, it's also in cases, I saw a video yesterday about a householder beating his servant in Saudi Arabia. And again, it was like, oh, he's not a true Muslim. And you see this all the time. Whenever there is a news report that happens to involve someone who is Muslim, it is always a case of he or she can't be a true Muslim, because Muslims wouldn't do this. Now, I know there are some people who believe that there is a media vendetta against Muslims. I don't share that view. I believe that it's quite convenient to blame the media for everything. And I think people need to just accept that there is a reality here, which is that violent political Islamism is a real phenomenon. And that is just a fact. Now, when we acknowledge it's a fact, and the thing is, the reason I have a problem with that insinuation is that I find it quite arrogant. Because the insinuation is that if a Muslim is not capable of doing that, then the person must be a non-Muslim. So saying that non-Muslims are capable of bad acts, but Muslims are not. Now it reminds. I'm going to make an analogy here. It might be a strange analogy to some people, but I'm making this because I think it ties into the argument I'm trying to make. In 1888, when Jack the Ripper was roaming the streets of London's East End, famous case never solved. Um, Foreigners were widely blamed for the outrage for the serial killing of at least 5 women, up as possibly as many as 11. And that got the East End of London into an absolute panic for those few months in late 1888. Now, not only a lot of the locals, but the press and a good deal of the establishment, not everyone, but a good deal of the establishment, insisted no Englishman is capable of doing this. This must be the work of an outsider. It must be a foreigner. Now, to this day, we don't know who the Jack the Ripper was. That's a subject, incidentally, that I've done quite a lot of research on, so I might make another video about that. But anyway, the point I'm making is, at the time, the notion was no Englishman is capable of doing this because Englishmen were meant to be civilized and chivalrous, and no Englishman's going to rip up a woman on the street. That was the logic. So they blame foreigners. No, maybe it was a foreigner. We still don't know who Jack the Ripper was. It could well have been a foreigner. It could well have been an Englishman. We don't know. The point I'm making here is that when some Muslims say, oh, that person can't be a Muslim, the insinuation is that Muslims are superior to other people. That is the insinuation. Can anyone dispute that? That is the insinuation of saying this person cannot be a Muslim. So I really have a problem with it. As a non-Muslim, I find it arrogant. I find it chauvinistic. I just think it's chauvinistic might be the wrong word because obviously it's not related to nationality. So okay, I retract that word. But the point I'm making is it is arrogant, and I think that the argument is one that is used time and time again. Now, on one hand, this is understandable because if you're a practicing Muslim and if you abhor these things, of course you're going to want to distance yourself from it. But the point that people need to understand is acknowledging that these people are Muslims, albeit flawed Muslims, doesn't mean that you're implicating yourself. It doesn't mean that your name as a Muslim is going to be tarnished by it. I think that in order to deal with this problem, in order to deal with any problem, you need to recognize what it is. Now, far too often, when it comes to this debate, yes, you get condemnation. Yes, you get statements like, oh, I condemn terrorism and it's terrible what he done. But far too many Muslims, quite frankly, are too interested in trying to preserve the image of Islam rather than recognizing what this problem is. Yes, of course, it's terrorism. But it isn't just terrorism. It is ideologically inspired terrorism. This is a fact. It is a plain, hard fact. It is ideological terrorism. Now, you could argue that Islam, the religion, has been perverted and misinterpreted by these people. That is an argument I would be prepared to listen to. I have here a copy of the Holy Quran. It's in Arabic, but there's an English translation corresponding with it. You'll see at the side there. Arabic text with corresponding English meanings. Hopefully sometime soon I'm going to get around to reading this, cover to cover. I'm going to read it with an open mind. Now, I know there's a lot of claims that there is violent surahs in the Quran, just as there are violent verses in the Old Testament of the Bible. But I want to go and read this with an open mind. I've got no intention of becoming a Muslim, but what I want to do is try and look at this as objectively as possible and try to understand what it is that might be leading these young men, predominantly young men, some young women, into being so brainwashed by this cancer, as a Syrian friend of mine called it, this cancer of Islamism. Um, what is it in the Holy Quran that's doing that? In fact, is it even fair to point out the Quran? Because very often these jihadists are not getting their extremism from the actual book itself, but from websites. I think that's a fair point. So clearly there is someone at the base, at the source, who is perverting this or misinterpreting in order to suck in vulnerable young men and women. Uh, a quick point, incidentally, about the guy's family. People are saying, oh, they should be deported and stuff. I fully disagree with that, because if you're going to go down that line, then firstly, they're British citizens. We're not talking about immigrants here. These people are British citizens. Secondly, by the same logic, then, Aaron Copland's family should be deported. Aaron Copland was the neo-Nazi who bombed Soho in 1999, killed 3 people, injured dozens. So, you know, if under that logic, everyone who's a bad sheep in the family would be deported, so it's a stupid argument. And actually, I've got a lot of sympathy with the family in a lot of these situations. I'm reading a book at the moment, and this is the second book I want to quote. I think it's very important. I may have quoted this before, but it's called The Islamist by Ed Hussein. I haven't read all of it yet. I'm about maybe a third of the way through. And at this point, he's talking about, as a young man at, I think it's Tower Hamlets College in London, he was a radical Islamist in the early 90s, and this really is an eye-opener as to how Islamism as a movement works. It's not straight cut, and it's not a case of hate preachers in a mosque just sucking in on people. It's a lot more complex than that. So I genuinely believe that a lot of Muslim families in Britain really don't know what their sons and daughters are up to, because they're like any other family. Most families will not know what their sons and daughters are doing all the time, especially if they're teenagers as opposed to children, because you cannot keep a 17-year-old on, you know, in your radar all the time. It's impossible. So people will sort of be reading into this and saying, oh, they're bad parents and stuff. Maybe to some extent they are. I don't know. I don't want to judge these people, because I can't imagine the hell that they're going through right now, knowing that their son not only has died himself, but probably killed innocent people in the process. I cannot imagine anything worse than getting that knowledge. So it must be an absolutely agonizing time for them. I remember during the London bombings, one of the bombers, I don't know if it was Hasib Hussein or another guy, his wife appeared to the media very bravely, I thought. She was clearly devastated. I don't know if it was the guy's wife or his mother, I can't quite recall, but it was a close relative anyway. And a lot of people at the time were sort of demonizing her along with him. Now, I've got no problem with people attacking these jihadists themselves, although I would say that if you're going to demonize 16 and 17-year-olds for that, and just to be clear, I have no sympathy with them, but if you're going to demonize them, then you'll have to demonize all young people, and you can't use the excuse for other young people that, oh, it's the mistakes of their youth. You know, it's no different if you get a young man or woman who joins a far-right organization. Are you going to use the same excuse, oh, it's the naivety of their youth? And there's a few points I'd like to round up with here, but I'll try not to make this video too long. I really, really think that there needs to be open debate about Islamism. At the moment, although the term is being more widely used in the media, and I believe that's a good thing, because we've moved on from the time when we were extremely politically correct, and large segments of the media would just talk about terrorism without talking about the fact that this was Islamist terrorism. I mean, when the IRA campaign was going on, we didn't just call it terrorism, we called it Irish Republican terrorism. That was the ideology. Likewise, this ideology is Islamism. And it's a lot more dangerous than the IRA, because the IRA never had a suicide cult in the same way. So this is a very deep problem. And I believe the only way that we're going to tackle it as a society, yes, we need unity. Yes, we're not going to get anywhere if we divide ourselves between Muslims and non-Muslims, especially given that the vast majority of British Muslims are normal, decent people. But I do believe that too many Muslims, and if you're watching this and you're Muslim, please hear me out. But I think too many people in the Muslim community are in denial about this problem of Islamism. Because if you're going to say that Daesh has no connection to Islam, by the same argument, the Crusaders of the 13th century had no connection to Christianity. I really see no difference. Because in both cases, you have violent organizations that are, or violent ideological movements that believe themselves that they are morally justified, but to everybody else, they're reprehensible, thuggish terrorists in every other sense. Now, most historians and most people would say that the Crusaders were fundamentalist Christians. They took their message directly from the Pope. They were fanatics. Now, who's going to dispute that? Therefore, why is it today we have this attitude that Daesh has nothing to do with Islam? It's phony, it's wrong, and in my view, it's actually quite cowardly. I fully understand if you're Muslim, you want nothing to do with these people. But just condemning it is not enough. You have to acknowledge the problem. Now, I, as a white British guy, what's my responsibility? Who is my community? Okay, other white people. Well, if there is a white far-right extremist, I condemn them. Yes. Do I recognize the problem? Yes. Do I make excuses for them? No. This is what I'm driving at here. And frankly, these issues are too damn important for political correctness to shack off a discussion on this. I absolutely insist that there is a difference between hating individuals and stirring up hatred against individuals, i.e. Muslims, and disliking or hating a religion. Now, if you allow your hatred of Islam to extend to hating Muslims, that's obviously a problem. But I insist that in a secular society, religion has to be open to criticism. It has to be. That doesn't mean that religious people don't have a right to defend their religion. Of course they do. But it works both ways. So I really feel uneasy when people criticize Islam and someone comes out and brands them as Islamophobe. I really have issue with that. Now, someone is being hostile to Muslims if they're saying that all Muslims are terrorists or, deport all Muslims or something like that. Yeah, that's extreme and that's wrong. But we need to accept this problem. And just because someone mentions a point of view that is politically incorrect does not make them wrong. I believe that the points I have raised are legitimate questions. I believe that there are young men and women who are being corrupted, they're being brainwashed by this sick ideology, but simply trying to say that the ideology, oh, it's just terrorism, and there's no ideological basis. Come on, really? That is willful ignorance. Now, Islamism is connected to the Salafism. Where is Salafism found? Saudi Arabia, which is the home of Mecca. So to try and say that Islamism doesn't come under the umbrella of Islam is just plain wrong. Again, it may well be a misinterpretation of Islam. It may well be that surahs from the Quran are metaphors as opposed to literal. But I do argue that they need to be better explained. Simply saying that Islam is perfect and Islam is peaceful and so on, the fact of the matter is most non-Muslims just aren't going to buy it. Because every day we hear the exact opposite. Every day there is an Islamist outrage, whether it be Nigeria or Syria or Iraq or Afghanistan or Pakistan. Every day there is a case of brutal human rights abuses under the name of Islamic law. These are facts. So it isn't just about terrorism. It isn't just about terrorism. What's happening to Raif Badawi, and this is another issue I have. A lot of Muslims would condemn the actions of ISIS, but they would have no problem whatsoever with what's happening to the blogger Raif Badawi in Saudi Arabia. And again, questions need to be asked about that. Now, shoot me down if you want, call me names if you want, but I believe the issues I'm talking about here are entirely valid. And I would be man enough to say this in a real world setting, in a lecture theatre, in a TV show. I would do it. because I absolutely believe that there are real issues here. Now, the approach that EDL and Britain First take is collective punishment of all Muslims, or collective scapegoating of all Muslims. I know Tommy Robinson says that's not what they do, but I believe their behaviour is reckless, and I don't think they help this problem at all. I believe they're only adding fuel to the fire. But there is a problem with Islamism in society, and as a society, we need to just get real about this and stop being so politically correct. I think it is improving a little bit. I think there is more honesty nowadays than there was maybe 10 years ago, and that's a good thing. There needs to be more candid debate about this. But, and perhaps that candidness has come because this problem continues. And, you know, the problem of Islamism today is much more severe, I would argue, than it was in the early 1990s. As Islam has grown as a religion, that means there's a lot of moderate Muslims, normal Muslims, and so on. That's fine. But it also has meant that pan-Islamism has grown. This is indisputable. Since 9/11, we've had Al Qaeda, and then subsequently since then, ISIS Daesh. Now, you could argue that this is funded by the CIA. You can get into all the conspiracy theories you want. But at the end of the day, this is an ideological issue. And to say that it isn't, I think is just plain wrong. You know, if you want to say that all Daesh fighters are CIA operatives or something like that, and I know there are people who have that conspiracy theory, to me, it's an excuse. Even if there is a record of CIA funding, and there might well be, you know, the CIA is a very powerful, very murky organization. Even if that is the case, it still doesn't change the fact that there is a problem in the world with fundamentalist Islam, and especially with human rights abuses connected to, for example, Islamic law. That's got nothing to do with the CIA. That's got nothing to do with conspiracy theories. So I'm going to leave it there. I've covered a lot of issues here, but I do believe the issues are very important. If you're Muslim and you've been watching this video, I really hope that you come away open-minded and you don't feel that I am attacking you personally, because I'm really, really not. Rather, I'm opening up discussion to some of the problems that are within Islam. Now, this thing about surahs being metaphorical as opposed to literal, well, in that case, if you're going to insist on being a defender of your faith, it's your responsibility to explain that and to explain what the surahs mean, rather than just saying, oh, it's perfect and you're an Islamophobe. That's not going to win any argument. It's just not. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you for listening.